Scientists and politicians have always just been spoiled kids with access to a lot of funding. They tend to look at the world through widened eyes full of wonder, questioning everything. Childlike curiosity is what fuels hypotheses, and like all kids, they usually have a favorite game to play: God. Like a sex worker in the cold streets, I'd sold my soul to the US government long before World War III was even a fear in civilians' minds. Heart and soul, I belonged to the National Guard, fighting the war rich oligarchs were too pussy to think any further about after waging it. I just didn't realize that after my heart stopped beating, they still owned the rights to what remained. I sacrificed my first life by tackling a grenade, protecting my brothers and sisters in arms during the Second Civil War. Saving the lives of my friends, I do not regret. They were more like family to me, really. But, like they expressed just before we were deployed into the streets, I've come to realize that the entirety of that war was instigated by the same government we had sworn to protect. They had been stoking the flames of hatred for decades, lying to the citizens and exacting false flag assassinations and trying to hide the fact that the President of the United States was a rapist and a pedophile until the volcano erupted. And once the people played into their hands, they caged them all like rabid dogs, and after that, God only knows what became of them. My poor wife and kids must have wept over an empty coffin. Just another lie from the government, I suppose. The pieces of my shattered body that were still viable were taken into some shadowy laboratory or some madman's playroom. Unfortunately, that included my mind, which meant I got to keep my memories. How nice of them. When I awoke, I was no longer a man, at least not completely. The missing parts of my body had been replaced with wired, blinking machinery. This included my right arm, my left leg, some of my abdomen, and half of my jaw, all of which were clearly metal, connected into my flesh with some sort of biotech wiring, running partly off of my own brain's electrical impulses. These additions contrasted greatly with my bronze skin and felt foreign and uncomfortable, although my silhouette was pretty symmetrical as the added parts were modeled to fit within my large muscular frame. The chill washing over my whole body let me know two things. The first, I was completely naked, my junk just out and proud, and two, I could actually feel through my robotic additions. Sitting up, I looked at the machinery that had made up my new hand, moving my fingers about freely before balling a fist. I then touched it to my still hairy pecs, feeling the warmth, the life, the heartbeat through the smooth silver metal fingertips. I found myself wondering where I was. Seemingly in reaction, my eyes, while blurry at first, began to show some strange lime green text in what looked like a sort of loading screen from one of my son Trey's video games. It seemed to be scanning my cold, dim surroundings, and it didn't take it very long at all. Recharging station, Cyborg 1, codename, Brawler. Just as it told me my location in both text form and a monotonous yet masculine robotic voice in my head, a harsh, bright white light illuminated the small square room around me. This showed me that I was lying on a flat bed with no blankets or pillows in its center, a literal charging cord running from my side and into a plug in the wall on my left. Downloading daily instructions. This was followed by another loading bar, which was steadily filling up. As this occurred, my charging cable retracted from the wall and recoiled back inside of me. This was admittedly a bit disconcerting, and so I stood up onto my feet, one made of flesh, the other of machinery. It was then that a doorway appeared through an opening wall before me. This revealed an empty corridor just beyond it, the lights of which were just as garish as the ones in my rest area. Walk out into the hallway and form a line with your fellow soldiers, then march northward and out into the training grounds. It is there that more information will be provided. Curiously, I stepped toward the doorway and poked my head out. I saw 5 other half-humans doing the same up and down the corridor. They all seemed just as confused as I was, but each of us did as we were told. Walking out, I was more than inclined to let my manhood sway unfettered, as most of the other cyborgs were men. However, there was one woman there, shyly struggling to cover her breasts with her arms, waiting for the rest of us to pass her by. The others did not even try to hide their eyes from her beautiful body, nor did they feign modesty by covering themselves up with their hands. They even chuckled to themselves and cracked jokes about how their new barracks were co-ed, not even caring how uncomfortable they were clearly making her. Having actually been raised to be a gentleman, I was always protective toward women. Well, anyone really, when it came to this sort of thing. So I made sure the other men passed before me, and I stepped out in front of her, modestly covering myself, making eye contact and desperately trying not to look at sensitive parts of her. I nodded, hoping that she would see that she would be safe with me, but I knew in this situation, most likely, none of us felt safe. I did, however, notice that the beautiful feminine cyborg had both legs replaced by mechanical versions. They had teeth on the inside of them, starting at her feet and ending just at the uppermost part of her thick thighs, right where her olive-toned human flesh began. It was as if these robotic legs were created to zip up together into one. An iridescent sheen glimmered across them like nacre shell. There were also long fin-like mechanical ears instead of human ones on the sides of her head, and mechanical gills flapping on the sides of her neck. Her hair was made up of countless thick, long wires, all in various rainbow vibrant colors, and ending in different types of attachment plugs. Her eyes also seemed to have some sort of lighting in them, as glowing white rings separated the black pupils and purple irises. She still waited for a safe distance between us before starting behind me. I couldn't blame her. Honestly, I probably would have done the same if our positions were switched. My wife, Maria, had told me long before I even proposed of the horrors that faced women every day, even in seemingly normal situations. It kind of turned me into an overly protective parent with Leah, our little girl. Then again, looking back now, I'm not sure if having any children in such a wicked world was a good decision in the first place. The other cyborgs and I marched through the hallway, the walls of which looked similar to our mechanical augmentations. They were metallic, separated in segments with tiny, seemingly random light bulbs flashing in areas of pure glowing circuitry with transistors, resistors, capacitors, and countless interconnections. I found myself touching them with my human hand and feeling somehow connected to them. Perhaps, in some way, I was. It wasn't very long before we arrived at some closed double doors. They were thick and iron, but as soon as we approached they separated, mechanically pulling apart and hiding within the walls on either side. This revealed a grayish-yellow, murky sky. The air itself was strangled in smog, but not a single one of us had issues breathing through it. Before us was a large, open training course, a glowing pool of toxic waste, a pile of desktop and laptop computers, all from different points in time, a gigantic pole towering over the surrounding iron walls and spires, and countless cages full of crazed, sick-looking human beings. Soon, a man appeared before us, directly between two of those cages as the creatures inside drooled and groaned, weakly reaching out from between the bars for him. "Welcome and congratulations," he exclaimed, holding his gloved hands up. He was clad from head to toe in a silver protective suit, breathing through tubes. His face was blurry and gray behind the little translucent window in his helmet. "You all are back from the dead, and to reward your bravery, we've given you some modifications." He then turned specifically to me, holding out his hand. "Brawler, why don't you come up here and show us an example?" I stepped forward. As the man backed away, the cage on the left opened, allowing those odd, terrifying beings to crawl out onto the dry, barren earth. As they made their way toward me, I saw their discolored flesh, their missing limbs, their decayed skin. They were the reanimated dead. One slowly approached me, dragging its broken leg behind it, which was only hanging on by a sliver of rotting skin. In pure guttural reaction, I punched it in the face with my predominant arm, my right one, the robotic one. This caused its skull to burst, sending decayed brains flying out and the rest of its body flying backward. Shocked by this inhuman strength, I pulled my new hand back and gazed upon it, studying the mechanisms, the structure of the joints in my fingers as I moved them. "That's right, super strength," the man shouted before me as the other creatures crawled toward me. "And that's not all. Brawler, take a karate stance." My brows furrowed in confusion and I cocked my head to the side, but as soon as I thought of the word, another loading bar and more text appeared on my eye screens, followed by that strange voice in my head. "Loading, karate muscle memory, 10th degree black belt skills." The screen then began to scroll through a list of available stances, showing associated images of a cute little anime version of me taking them. They were all Japanese words that I did not recognize as a born and bred American. Almost automatically, I took the Kamei, which was translated on my eye screen at the same time as the ready stance. It had me relaxed, but with ready shoulders, with my knees bent, standing stably in harmony with gravity. As soon as the next enemy approached, I unleashed a roundhouse kick with my left foot, crushing its skull with my mechanical augmentations once again. This also sent its body flying backward like a lifeless ragdoll, crashing into the others like a bowling ball into pins. I got a strike. The man then continued using me as an example, somehow triggering me into switching to Kung Fu. Once I had defeated another enemy, my fighting style changed to Taekwondo, then to boxing, which I actually knew a bit about before falling into this dystopian wonderland. Finally, he had me use Krav Maga, and the third and final creature was killed. Then it was Ghost's turn, and I really enjoyed watching him go. As pale as an actual spirit, he was slender in build and seemed to be of Eastern Asian descent, with a pretty scarred-up face and short, stark white hair that flowed about as if he were underwater. Most interestingly, he had one glowing red eye, lit by an electrical light. Thanks to his robotic feet and hands, he could levitate a few inches off of the ground through holes in them that blew out air, and after he learned that, I don't think I saw him walk another step. He fought with chains shackled to his wrists, and his abilities included night vision, called Ghost Sight, invisibility, which was referred to as mirror flesh, and ectoplasm, which involved him literally vomiting up a glowing glue-like goop that stuck enemies where they stood, but also ate away at their flesh like acid. His most impressive ability was called the Poltergeist, which allowed him to remotely hijack or possess electronics, even other cyborgs momentarily, but it took a lot of his energy to do so. He actually used that last one on me, and in doing so, he made me do the Charleston, and we were all still completely naked, mind you, and no, he did not let me cover my pendulous manhood. Everyone but the woman seemed to have a wonderful time laughing at me. Next up was Dragon. He was some sort of Latino with a toned body, long shimmering ebony hair, and neatly trimmed facial scruff. He had literal wings, which he used to fly, though it took a lot of his energy to do. Both of his eyes were augmented, their irises a fiery orange, like embers. His right arm had been replaced with one with a clawed hand, while the left one had changed to a rocket launcher that shot scaly, egg-shaped bombs. It could also be used as a flamethrower, both of which he really enjoyed using on the undead. Yeti was a gruff, older Caucasian man with a long white beard. He had a shaved head and a scar over his right eye. Both of them were an icy blue color altogether, with no irises or pupils to be seen. He could summon and control ice, snow, and frigid winds through his augmented hands. Though it would drain most of his energy, he could even change the atmosphere around him to deathly freezing temperatures, which he could survive with ease. After that, Thunderbird stepped up. He was a dark-skinned black man with long golden clipped locks that were all pulled back into a ponytail. With golden eyes and a goatee, he had a massive mechanical set of wings that served as lightning rods in thunderstorms, allowing him to recharge while out in the field. He could fly much quicker but less higher than Dragon, and could shoot bolts of lightning from his fingertips. Along with his hands, most of his back had seemingly been replaced as well, allowing him to shoot something called storm bombs up into the sky from just below his wings. Those could summon storms, but he could only hold one of them at a time. Finally, it was the woman's turn. Our commanding officer introduced her as Siren, and she reluctantly stepped forward. As she approached the glowing pool of waste, her mechanical legs fused and fin-like apparatuses unfurled from her lowered pointed feet. She was able to swim through that yellow nuclear sludge with ease, luring the undead into it as she swam within it like a real live mermaid. Her gills worked perfectly, and her eyes had been upgraded to see in any liquid as it ate away at their rotting flesh like acid. The commander told her that she was also able to do so in normal water, be it salt or fresh, but that wouldn't have been as impressive. She also had dolphin-like sonar that could mind control all sea creatures in a limited area. There were retractable blade-like fins that could sprout from the sides of her forearms, which she could use as self-defense. Another ability was the use of wires of her hair to download data from old computer systems, which she did with ease on the piles of desktops and laptops in the corner of the field. Finally, her siren song could temporarily freeze electronics, including other cyborgs like us, and it did. Our commanding officer then revealed some armor for us. It was robotic as well, but fit with our augmentations like pieces of a puzzle. Of course, Siren's breastplate looked like the classic seashell bra of a mermaid. Yeti's armor was covered in white fur, Thunderbird's was feathered, and Dragon's armor was designed to look like scales. It was all very thematic. As we got dressed, he explained that we each had some more common augmentations done while we slept. This included communication devices in our forearms, which would flip up, revealing a video screen clamshell and a keyboard below it, kind of like that thing that Buzz Lightyear had in Toy Story. He said we could sign up for additional augmentations in the common area. That is where you will eat your 3 square meals, all courtesy of us, and of course, you will be able to socialize not only with your own battalion, but others as well. We do ask you to go by your code names at all times. The life you had before is done. This is a second chance for all of you. What does that mean? I asked. What of our families, our friends? He took a deep breath. You were out a lot longer than you realized, Brawler. The world out there is a lot different than the one you left behind. Anyway, changing the subject with ease, it was clear that he did not care about us at all. Of course, we had our eye scanners and mind readers, memory drives, and information downloads into our brains. These were to help us during our battles, but there were hundreds of optional apps we could download from the cloud. He explained that we could search for them by simply thinking about them, and the screens would overlay whatever we were looking at. They got video games, physical health apps, yes, even porn, you pervs, he growled, to which the other man predictably chuckled. But we also had 2 mandatory apps called Mind Radio, which played commercials and news announcements at random times throughout the day, along with optional music channels which we could turn on and off at will. It also featured the ability to subscribe to any Mindcasts, podcasts but in your head, or musical artists that were available on the cloud. It also kept a record of our every thought for what he called safety purposes, which immediately put me on edge. There was also Tranquility, a mental health app that kept cyborgs positive and happy with binaural beats and had special settings for people with mental illnesses. This forewent the need for human medication like antidepressants, anti-anxieties, etc. He said they already had our medical history and that we didn't need to worry about a thing. The last 2 were called Viral Proc and Fertile Proc. These were body modifications within our reproductive organs that help men create virile sperm and assisted women in having fertile wombs. Because reproduction keeps the world turning, he explained happily. And all of these will automatically turn on within the next day or so don't be alarmed if some music starts playing or you hear an announcement about a terrorist attack in the South in your head, but have fun with them. It isn't all business here, you know? We're a family. Siren said, shifting her weight from one leg to the other. Judging by her face, she did not trust this man. Are we getting paid for this, or is it like a work-to-live kind of thing? I'm glad you asked. Compensation for wartime soldiers works a little differently than it did in your time. You will receive credits for each kill you make, which means yes, you got paid for each enemy you defeated and will defeat today. Paid training! We love it, right? It was then that more text messages appeared on my iScreen. 30,000 credits added, the voice in my head read. With these credits, you can pay for special downloadable apps and augmentations, but the really cool thing, and this is something we are incredibly proud of, is this. He made his way over to the corner of the training course where what looked like an old video game arcade cabinet stood. On its screen it had a number of weapon options, from melee weapons to guns. He chose a random one, and a beam of light poured out of the screen, seemingly 3D printing a little handgun in the air next to him. He took it into his grasp. With credits, you can actually purchase limited-time items to use during each battle. From machine guns to ray guns to baseball bats to swords, we've got it all. And at this same convenient kiosk, one of which stands at each battleground, you can upgrade said weapons and add their own augmentations to them. Isn't that awesome? We all just stood there studying him in confusion. I don't think any of us knew what to make of it. "This is a joke, right?" asked Getty in a deep southern accent. "Ain't no way this is real." Our commanding officer chuckled. "Oh, it's real," he stated sternly. "Now, there are 3 types of enemies. 2 are similar to you. The first you've faced here, an endless army of the undead. There is a virus that reanimates all dead humans and animals created in South Asia. It is spread through bites and scratches, which leads to a deadly infection, but as of last year it has become airborne, meaning everything and everyone that dies will rise again." "Does that include us?" Dragon asked, scale-clad, crossing his arms. He shook his head. "No, you are programmed with a self-destruct sequence in the event of becoming infected." Thunderbird chortled. "Well, that's a relief," he sarcastically spewed. "What are the other enemies?" I asked. "The second enemy type is more dangerous. Well, these are technically 2 different kinds, but we lump them together. These are animals and humans, deformed and mutated either due to nuclear waste and radiation or some Russian mad scientists with too much time on their hands, he explained, laying the handgun to rest on the cabinet next to him. Think of them as rabid creatures because all they know is violence. Be careful in how you defeat the mutated animals because coming in contact with high levels of radiation will result in detrimental consequences for your fleshier parts. Why is there so much radiation that would cause such high amounts of genetic mutations? Siren questioned curiously. He let a sigh. Unfortunately, a lot of the world has been destroyed and laid waste due to nuclear warfare. You'll know whether you're fighting mutated creatures or human experiments before you're dropped into battle, because knowledge is half the battle, am I right? But what of the third enemy? I asked in complete trepidation. The more I learned, the more uncomfortable with this whole thing I became. The third enemy is humans. Regular, everyday humans, he answered grimly. They are called the Rebels, and they are against everything our beautiful Republic of America stands for. Republic of America? Each of us soldiers asked simultaneously. Our commanding officer chuckled. Unfortunately, the Second Civil War left the United States divided, both ideologically and physically. But don't worry, we're still the good guys. Somehow I had trouble believing that, and I agreed with Yeti. This all seemed like some sort of sick joke. And my heart ached for my wife and kids, my sister and my parents, my brothers in arms. I never even got to say goodbye. After this, that weird man stepped away, telling us to continue to work together as we trained, and the rest of the cages, about 10 or so, all opened simultaneously around the grounds, allowing the undead freedom to roam, eager to consume what remained of our human flesh, and with us distracted by them, our mysterious trainer vanished as quietly and as stealthily as he had appeared. As a team, we worked pretty well together. It wasn't long before we'd used our abilities to defeat each of the undead. As soon as the last one fell, we received an update in our eye screens telling us to head back inside and walk down the eastern corridor to the cafeteria and commons area as dinner was being served. It was like high school, hundreds of us in line getting our trays from lunch ladies and sitting in tables of our predetermined cliques. The other soldiers were also different and unique. There was a mummy cyborg with sand-controlling powers that actually looked undead. His name was Sandstorm. Another one was themed after a fairy with large luminescent butterfly wings. She was called Fairy. There was even a spider woman, Black Widow, with 4 sharp poison-laced appendages augmented onto her torso. Of course, she could spin webs of silk from her fingertips. The most interesting one I saw was called Steampunk, whose machinery was themed after steam-powered clockwork cogs and featured Victorian-inspired armor, like a top hat and a monocle scanner instead of ones built into his eyes. My squad sat together at an empty table. Our food was in 3 square pieces, each wrapped in brown packaging. One was a brick of vegetables, another one of meat, and the third was of fruit for dessert. Though specifically what vegetables, meats, or desserts were never disclosed. The final item on the tray was a rectangular box which opened from the top. Within it was water, but it did not taste like any water I had ever had before. We began to talk about the situation, our pasts, whatever. Siren was in the Marine Corps and had been training for the Olympics as a swimmer. Ghost was dishonorably discharged from the Air Force for drug possession. Dragon had been a disgraced cop with anger issues who did not mind killing anyone that pissed him off. Yeti was a battle-hardened Army veteran. Siren sat next to me. As I told my story, my eyes filling with tears over how much I loved my comrades, she softly touched my hand as it rested on the table, and we shared an understanding gaze. No words were needed. Finally, Thunderbird told us that he was in the National Guard like me, but the last thing he remembered was being arrested for refusing the order of the President to turn on the American people. All of us grew deathly silent after that. It was unspoken, but I could feel it. We all felt that something was off, something was wrong. We were just too afraid to verbalize it or say it out loud. But I believe we could all see it clearly in each other's eyes. Everyone ranged in age from what looked like late teenagers to the elderly, though I couldn't help but notice the lack of children there. This contrasted with what our commander said about the importance of breeding. If we were to have children, why were there none with the people here? Just then, a hologram of a suited man appeared in the very center of the cafeteria, which was met with thunderous applause from the other squads. He was pasty, with dark eyes and slicked back blonde hair, clean-shaven and thin. Introducing himself as President Bennett III, he began to speak of our upcoming battles as if they were being broadcast across the country on some sort of reality show. Whether you're a grizzled veteran or one of our newly awakened, Season 10 of World War III is in line to be our biggest yet. People at home are all waiting with bated breath in front of their screens to see how you perform, he exclaimed, smiling widely, and I know I'm one of them. And with that, he flickered out of existence. As soon as this ended, floating flat screens appeared, hovering around the cafeteria, showing past battles of the Cyborgs. These violent fights took place in a range of areas, from futuristic cities I could have never imagined to barren deserts with the remains of suburban neighborhoods strewn throughout. They fought the undead, the mutated, and even other cyborgs, all quite impressively. I had assumed that our first battle would have been right away, perhaps even the next day, or at least perhaps they had some more training scheduled for us, but no. The instructions that came on to all of our ice screens after dinner was to report to our recharging stations and rest, because bright and early the next day we had photo shoots scheduled, followed by interviews. Photo shoots and interviews, like we were all some sort of pop stars about to release a new album. What the fuck was going on? My squad mates were all confused as well, but just accepted that this was how wars were fought in this time. Hoping this was all just some weird coma dream, I dismissed these thoughts and returned to my recharging chambers. When I lied down onto that flat bed, my charging cord snaked its way out of my side and automatically plugged into the wall. Recharging, commencing, appeared on my eye screen, and I was quickly put to sleep. Waking up in that same white room was quite hard on me. It meant that I would have had to come to terms with this dystopia being my new reality. Drowning in a sickly fusion of homesickness and heart sickness, I almost teared up, and I was going to have to grieve my old life. My photo shoot, led by a photographer dressed in all silver with long hair that stood straight up, with a camera literally embedded into his forehead, mostly consisted of me posing and flexing my muscles. I didn't really have any special abilities to show off, after all. It was the interview that was incredibly interesting. The interviewer was dressed just as oddly as the photographer. She wore what looked like a box, with her arms and legs coming out of holes in it. Apparently fashion was another casualty of the wars. It was covered in small, multicolored light bulbs that created happy, sad, angry, confused, and aroused faces, similarly to the emojis we had while texting on our cell phones back in my day. This, however, was connected to whatever emotion she was feeling at the time. Her camera was in her large goggle-like sunglasses, and it was recording live. "Bruiser!" she exclaimed. "You're one of the new soldiers. How does it feel to have a second chance at life?" I cleared my throat. It's Brawler, actually, and I'm still kind of in shock about the whole thing. She nodded. "Are you enjoying your new skills?" Yeah, I mean, part of me is a little jealous that I'm the boring one of my squad, but I suppose super strength is nothing to scoff at. A fake laugh escaped her clearly plumped lips. "Speaking of your squad, did we detect some chemistry between you and Siren?" My brows furrowed as my memories flashed back to dinner the evening prior. How? Are we being watched here? I asked, looking around. I mean, when the obvious cameras aren't rolling. She nodded and smiled brightly, her emoji shirt mirroring her facial expression again. "Of course! We have a behind-the-scenes special live stream leading up to the first battle. It's all about your training and how you prepare for it. Everything you soldiers see, all of the Republic sees too." I became quiet, contemplating this. Blinking repeatedly, I took a deep breath. Well, I'm glad I decided not to jack off last night. Another feigned chuckle escaped her swollen lips as I was coaxed off of the stage via instructional overlay of my vision. There you have it, folks. Bruiser, a big, muscular himbo heartthrob who I just know is going to be a fan favorite. I know some of you out there are already shipping him with the mysterious Siren. Up next, we have the fiery dragon, right after this word from our sponsors. Himbo? I graduated college. I majored in U.S. history and law. Whatever. After our photo shoots and interviews were completed, we were told to report to the training grounds again. And this session was more of the same from the previous day. The only difference was that we were on our own this time. We used our credits to purchase weapons. I got a machine gun. Siren chose a trident to go along with her mermaid theme. In order to distract ourselves, the two of us competed for the most undead kills, ending up in a tie and laughing about it. Maybe the fans did notice some chemistry between us after all. The next day consisted of our final training session. It was during this that those mandatory apps were activated within our minds, randomly playing news announcements and advertisements, but again, Siren and I grew closer in our time together. We were both nervous about our first battle and very annoyed about having a radio in our heads, but we did our best to distract one another. The next morning saw my squad and I on the weirdest helicopter I'd ever seen, flying over a city of skyscrapers with rainbow windows. These buildings all levitated in the air above the streets, which were strangled by a toxic cloud of pollution. Literal flying cars, similar to the kinds in the futuristic movies I watched as a kid, zoomed all around the air between the towers. Along with them, there were massive screens floating throughout the dark, smoggy sky, showing advertisements for body augmentations and mental downloads for apps. This was Spectrum City. We were dropped into the air onto the roof of a large building, which was already overflowing with the undead, and we wasted no time. Siren took on the role of the leader with ease. She yelled out our positions, and we took them. With Yeti's ice, Dragon's flames, Thunderbird's electricity, Ghost's ectoplasm, Siren's fin blades, and my, fists, we were racking up credits to the motherfucking sky. It looks like the newbies are showing off. They are in it to win it, a loud booming voice shot through the skies. The flying screens were now showing close-ups of us as we fought. Asia's undead army is losing this battle to the Cyborgs. It was like a fucking football game. Was this war or entertainment? It reminded me of the ancient Roman Colosseum, where the two seemed to fuse. On other roofs surrounding us, we could see a handful of other cyborg squads fighting their own hordes. They had been dropped off by their own helicopters. It wasn't long before the announcer and the screens began to focus on some of them. Soon, my new brothers in arms and I were diving through the air and into the toxins below. Our feet cracked the pavement of the street as we landed. It was there that we saw for the first time radiation-mutated animals. Our eye scanners automatically identified them as bears, but they were hairless and horrifying. Some of them had multiple heads or limbs, teeth growing out of the sides of their mouths. They looked like a Salvador Dali painting in beast form, like something had violently twisted their features about. Drooling and growling, they made their way toward us. Siren issued a warning, reminding us of their radiation-tainted blood, telling us not to get too close, and we charged into battle. The new squad has already descended into the den of mutants. They are just craving violence, my friends, the announcer continued, his voice shaking the very ground beneath us. Dragons burning these horrifically deformed animals to a crisp. Thunderbird is throwing out bolts of lightning. Ghost has his ectoplasm just bursting out of him, and Yeti's ice is freezing them solid. I could not see the screens through the thick yellow fog, but I knew they were probably back on us. But Brawler and Siren only have up-close combat skills and weapons currently. Whatever shall they do? Hearing this, Siren shot an annoyed look back to me. She then looked around and found one of those strange little weapon kiosks. Motioning toward it, she took off, and I followed closely behind. She purchased a semi-automatic rifle, something she was apparently comfortable with. I, on the other hand, felt a bit more adventurous, and so I chose something called a plasma ray gun. It was the most expensive item, so I assumed it must have been good, and I just barely had enough for it. It was a handgun, but lit up in a strange way, and it was oddly shaped. Out of its barrel shot blindingly bright beams of light that literally disintegrated anything they touched in one hit. Chuckling, I smiled widely, staring down at it. Oh, I think I found my new favorite toy. Brawler got the ray gun, folks, the announcer continued. It's over! He was right. With that weapon, we made quick work of those mutated beasts. Unfortunately, both my ray gun and Siren's rifle dissipated into nothingness after that battle was won. Suddenly, a wave of brackish water flowed through the street, sending us spinning beneath its depths. I couldn't see through the thick grayish liquid, nor could I hear anything. My mechanics were unharmed, but I could not breathe underwater like Siren. Thankfully, she found me in her mermaid form and pulled me to the surface. As the flood rushed through the abandoned city streets, she struggled to keep my head above water. We came across a large floating platform clearly designed for us to stand on and ride, and she dragged me up onto it. She then immediately dove back into the depths in search of our friends. Soon, however, I noticed something in the distance. It was Yeti, walking on the rushing water. His feet were actually freezing it at their touch. It wasn't long before he made his way over to me, asking if I was alright. Although I had been coughing up water, I told him I believed I would be fine. I'm more worried about the others, I admitted, looking around as we aimlessly drifted throughout the flooded city streets. And apparently I was right to be. That din of a disembodied voice announced that Dragon had drowned in the water. That is going to cost their squad 10,000 credits apiece. He was right. The credits counter on my vision overlay went down by that same amount. Just then, Thunderbird flew down from the sky and landed between Yeti and I. "What the fuck?" he managed, just as shocked as we were. I shook my head. "This is insane. Putting monetary value on people's lives," I stated, still looking around the volatile waters for Siren and Ghost. "How is everyone just okay with this?" "These ain't our people anymore," said Yeti gruffly. "This ain't the America I loved and fought for." Finally, Siren reappeared below us in the rushing waters. Ghost was wrapped in her arms, and we helped her pull him up onto the platform. He wasn't breathing, so I gave him CPR. In a few minutes he opened his eyes and immediately began to cough up that nasty liquid. "The newbies saved Ghost!" which gives them back 5,000 credits split between the 5 remaining soldiers in their squad. Just then a massive being crashed onto the platform behind us, shaking it so that it almost made us fall back into the water. Turning around and regaining our composure, we each froze in shock and fright. It appeared to have once been humanoid, but was now mutated beyond comprehension. Instead of arms, it had 2 fleshy tentacles, sickeningly writhing at its sides. The abyss of a mouth on its stomach was wide and gaping, showing long, sharp, needle-like teeth. Covering most of its face was one giant vertical red eye, with paper-white skin splattered in what looked to be blood. Honestly, it looked demonic. "Ah, the newbies are facing the first Russian experiment," the announcer's voice echoed all around. "Let's see how they handle this." All of a sudden, the creature slung one of its tentacles out and wrapped around Yeti. It then jerked him into its mouth and began to eat him alive. Blood and wires and hunks of flesh and metal spewed everywhere, but it was his screams of agony that were seared into my memory. The announcer announced his death just as the creature discarded the body into the flood as we continued rushing through the city streets on the floating platform. "They should have stocked up on temporary weapons before the final fight," that annoying voice continued as our credits went down again. "Let's see if they survive." Thunderbird unleashed a massive bolt of lightning from his fingertips. It struck the creature, crippling it momentarily. Seeing his opportunity, Ghost shot his acidic ectoplasm, sticking it in place on the platform and binding its tentacles in place. With a righteous fury radiating from her crying eyes, Siren then rushed toward it and stabbed into its giant vertical eye with her fin blades, slashing it, shredding it into pieces, to which it shrieked out in agony. Finally, I ran to it and punched it as hard as I possibly could, sending it flying off into the distance, and all of us collapsed onto our knees on that platform as the announcer stated that although we rushed through it, which cost us 2 of our squad mates, we'd won our first mission. Before we had the time to even comprehend everything that had just happened, however, an odd orb shot down onto the platform from the smoggy skies. This unleashed an invisible energy that paralyzed us all. "Warning, battery life draining rapidly," appeared on my screen as my inner voice read it in my mind, showing a battery icon depleting. My vision was fading. My strength was waning, and the last thing I saw before losing consciousness was another cyborg, a ninja, dual-wielding katanas, appearing before me. I woke on an actual bed with actual sheets, pillows, and blankets in a room very different from my recharging station. The walls were covered in chipped, fading wallpaper that depicted flowers. There were flowers in a vase on the table next to me, filling the room with a sweet fragrance. Beautiful paintings of serene landscapes framed in handsome wood were hung attractively along the walls, and for the first time in my second life, I actually felt safe. There was a stinging pain radiating from the back of my head. Feeling it with my fingers, I realized that there was now stitches there, and it was only then that I realized my screen overlay had vanished. No scanners, no credits, no battery bar. Even the radio in my mind had been silenced. "Good, you're awake," came an aged yet familiar voice from the shadowy corner of the room. Though her beautiful face had aged dramatically, I immediately recognized my beautiful wife. Completely human, with nary an augment, her hair was pure white, and she was now in a wheelchair. Tears of guilt and sorrow filled my eyes as I slowly, weakly stepped off of the bed. Ignoring her concern as she pleaded with me to rest, I stepped over to her and collapsed onto my knees before her. Holding her hands within my own, I wept as I gazed into her beautiful blue eyes, apologizing profusely between sobs. I had left her all alone in such a dark and twisted world, and I wasn't sure if I would ever be able to forgive myself. Maria shook her head. "You saved your friends, and they're regarded as heroes in the resistance now, so don't regret a thing," she said, smiling and tilting her head. Tears of her own were streaming down her wrinkled face. "I love you, and Trey and Leah will want to see you soon, but you need to rest." My eyes widened. "Trey and Leah are here?" She nodded. "Now don't worry, we took out your microchips. The Republic won't be able to find any of you, alright?" I took a deep, trembling breath. Maria, I began, preparing myself to ask a question I wasn't even sure if I wanted to know the answer to. How did war and business and entertainment come to cross together like this? I'm afraid this was always going to be the outcome. As soon as the American people elected a reality TV show host as president, the country was on a direct path to doomsday. But that doesn't mean we can't take this country back. I sniffled. You don't think it's too late at this point? She smiled, her crinkly eyes lighting up. I do not. As long as we have hope in our hearts and the desire to change things for the better, to improve, to progress, to evolve, we can do anything. I nodded. Though I wasn't certain if I truly believed it, I was determined to repeat it within my mind until I did. And hearing my own inner monologue in my head again instead of that robotic voice was such a relief. I was scared, sure, but I had Maria back. My children and I would be reunited soon, and I had new brothers and a sister in arms. Friends. I wasn't going to give up. My squad was going to fight back, and we were going to win. It was our turn to play God, it seemed.